Okay, so like everyone's been talking about AI lately, right? And especially after like all that stuff with Sam Altman and OpenAI, it feels like the whole world is like shifting under our feet and like we're all trying to figure out what it means. So, in this deep dive, we're going to unpack all that, and not just like the tech stuff, but also the leadership challenges and what it's actually like to build a company when everything's changing so fast.
It really is amazing. Like you think about OpenAI just a couple years ago, and they were this kind of quiet research lab. Nobody was really paying attention. And then suddenly, boom.
Right. It really was like overnight. I mean, it wasn't that long ago that only like a few of us were even following what OpenAI was doing. And then they launched ChatGPT in November 2022, and
Sure.
suddenly it's like everyone's an AI expert.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Like Altman keeps talking about a tipping point, and you can see in the numbers, they went from like 100 million weekly users to over 300 million in just a few months.
Yeah.
That kind of growth is, I mean, even in the tech world, that's crazy.
It's mind-boggling, but I guess it wasn't all like smooth sailing, was it? Altman's been pretty open about the pressure and the stress and like how hard it is to lead in a field that's changing so fast.
Like they're building the plane while they're flying it.
Yeah.
There's no rule book,
Yeah.
You're making decisions with like incomplete information, and you're constantly having to adapt. And the whole world is watching.
And then on top of all that, you've got the whole firing and reinstatement thing. What a mess.
I know it's tempting to just like write it off as Silicon Valley drama. But I think it actually points to a much bigger question. Like, how do you govern a company that's building technology this powerful? I mean, this is technology that could potentially like reshape
Yeah.
society as we know it. So who gets to decide what they do? How do you ensure that they're being transparent and accountable? These are huge questions, and they're not going away.
Yeah, that's a good point. We get so focused on like the shiny new tech that we forget about the human side of things, the leadership, the ethical dilemmas.
Totally. And I think Altman's experience, even though it's been pretty crazy,
Mhm.
offers some important lessons about
Mhm.
like resilience and adaptability and building a strong support network.
Mhm.
He actually specifically thanked Ron Conway and Brian Chesky for their support during that whole thing.
Oh, that's interesting. I mean, I know Conway is a big time investor and Chesky co-founded Airbnb, but it seems like their expertise is in very different areas than AI. So why do you think their support was so crucial for Altman?
Yeah, that's what makes it so interesting. I mean, Conway is known for being this like ultimate connector in Silicon Valley. He can get things done, and he knows how to navigate tough situations. And Chesky, well, he built a company that completely disrupted a traditional industry. So he probably had a lot of insight into like scaling up really fast and managing public perception.
Hmm.
So it seems like to really navigate this AI revolution, you need more than just technical expertise. You need leadership, you need strategic thinking, and you need to understand the bigger picture.
So we've got this company that's been through a lot, and it seems like they've come out stronger. But where are they actually going? What's their goal?
Okay, that's where things get really interesting. So Altman starts off talking about AGI, artificial general intelligence. And at first he's talking about it in ways we're all starting to get used to. Like AI agents becoming part of the workforce and being able to do lots of tasks as well as humans. He even predicted that this could happen by like 2025. But then he takes it a step further.
You're talking about superintelligence, right? That sounds like something out of a movie.
It does. But this is where the conversation goes from interesting to potentially world-changing.
Yeah.
Because we're not just talking about AI doing specific things better than us. We're talking about AI that could be smarter than any human in every way.
So what does that even look like? I mean, what can an AI that's smarter than any human actually do?
That's the million-dollar question.
Mm-hmm.
And even the experts don't really know.
Well, this deep dive just got a lot deeper.
Yeah. Because what Altman is suggesting is that OpenAI isn't just aiming for incremental improvements. They're aiming for a fundamental leap forward, something that could unlock solutions to problems we haven't even thought of yet.
It's exciting and kind of scary at the same time.
Definitely. And that's why the ethical considerations are so important. If we're talking about an AI that can potentially do anything, like Altman says, then we need to be really careful about what that anything means. We need to make sure this technology benefits everyone.
And that brings us to one of Altman's most interesting statements. Given the possibilities of our work, OpenAI cannot be a normal company. What do you think he meant by that?
Well, I think he's suggesting that the traditional model of a company that's just focused on profit, that might not be the right model when you're dealing with technology this powerful.
So what's the alternative? What does a responsible AI company look like?
That's a tough question. And I honestly don't know if anyone had the answer yet. But I think it probably involves a lot more transparency and public accountability and maybe even some kind of international cooperation to make sure this technology is developed ethically.
It sounds like we're entering uncharted territory here.
We are. And that's why it's so important to be having these conversations now, before it's too late.
Okay, but before we get too far ahead of ourselves, let's come back to this idea of superintelligence. What are the potential implications, both good and bad, if we actually achieve it?
Well, on the positive side, imagine an AI that could help us solve climate change, or cure diseases, or discover new sources of clean energy. It could revolutionize healthcare education, so many aspects of our lives.
It's almost hard to imagine.
I know. But then there's the other side. What if this superintelligence doesn't share our values? What if it falls into the wrong hands? What if it decides that humans are the problem?
Okay, hold on. I think we need to unpack those concerns a little more carefully. We'll pick up this thread in part 2 of our deep dive. All right, so we were just talking about, like, some pretty scary stuff, superintelligence and what could happen if it goes wrong. It all sounds a little like science fiction, though.
Yeah, I mean, some of the scenarios people talk about are definitely out there. But I don't think we should just dismiss the risks.
Right, because even if it's not like a Terminator situation, there are still some serious ethical concerns.
Absolutely. And I think one of the biggest challenges is figuring out how to make sure that superintelligence, if we ever actually create it, is aligned with human values. Because what happens if it develops its own set of values and those values conflict with ours?
It's a pretty unsettling thought.
It is. And it's not just a hypothetical problem either. We're already seeing examples of AI systems that show biases or make decisions that are hard for humans to understand.
So how do we prevent those problems from getting worse, especially if we're talking about something as powerful as superintelligence?
That's the big question. And honestly, I don't think anyone has a perfect answer yet.
Yeah.
But I think it starts with recognizing that AI development isn't just a technical challenge. We need to involve people from other fields, like ethicists, philosophers, social scientists, policymakers, from the very beginning.
It's almost like we need a whole new field of ethics, like AI ethics or something.
Actually, there is a growing field called AI ethics. And it's not just about preventing AI from doing harm. It's also about making sure AI is used to make the world a better place, a more just and equitable society.
So it's not just about building safeguards, it's about shaping the values that are built into AI from the ground up.
Exactly. And that's a lot harder than just writing code. It means having some really tough conversations about what kind of future we want and what role we want AI to play.
Which brings us back to Altman's statement about OpenAI not being a normal company. If they're really serious about developing superintelligence responsibly, they can't just operate like any other company, right?
I agree. And to be fair, OpenAI has taken some steps in the right direction. They've released a charter that outlines their principles for beneficial AGI. And they've said they're committed to sharing their research and collaborating with others.
But is that enough? I mean, can we really trust a private company, even one with good intentions, to handle this level of power?
That's a good question. And it's something that people are debating a lot right now. Some people think we need stronger government regulation. Others think the private sector is better equipped to innovate.
It seems like it's a really tough balance to find. We want to encourage progress, but we also need to make sure this technology doesn't get out of control.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important to have these conversations now. While AI is still relatively early in its development, the decisions we make today are going to have a huge impact on the future.
This whole conversation about the potential consequences of superintelligence, it reminds me of something Carl Sagan once said. He said, "We've arranged a global civilization in which most crucial elements profoundly depend on science and technology. We have also arranged things so that almost no one understands science and technology. This is a prescription for disaster. We might get away with it for a while, but sooner or later, this combustible mixture of ignorance and power is going to blow up in our faces."
Wow. That's really relevant to what we're talking about. Because if we don't understand the technology we're creating, how can we possibly hope to control it?
And how can we even have a meaningful conversation about the ethical implications of AI if most people don't even understand the basics?
It's a huge challenge. And it's not just limited to AI. Technology is advancing so quickly, and our ability to understand it and regulate it just can't keep up.
So what can we do about it? I mean, it's easy to feel overwhelmed by all this.
I think the first step is just to learn more. Educate yourself about AI, about the potential benefits and risks, about the ethical questions.
Okay, so let's say we do that. What's next? How do we go from understanding the problem to actually doing something about it?
I think it's about having these conversations with your friends and family, with your elected officials, Support organizations that are working on responsible AI development. Make your voice heard.
Because at the end of the day, the future of AI isn't going to be decided by a few tech companies or governments. It's going to be shaped by all of us.
Exactly. And the more informed and engaged we are as citizens, the better chance we have of creating a future where AI is used for good.
That's a good point. But before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I want to go back to something you said earlier about AI already showing biases and making decisions that are hard for humans to understand. Can you give us some concrete examples of that? Because I think that's a really important point to understand.
Sure. There have been quite a few cases in recent years where AI systems have been shown to have biases based on things like race, gender, or other factors.
Hmm.
For example, there was a case where an algorithm used to predict whether someone would commit another crime was found to be biased against black defendants. And there have been instances where facial recognition systems have misidentified people of color, much more often than white
Yeah,
people.
so these aren't just theoretical concerns. These are real problems that are already affecting people's lives.
Exactly. And it shows how important it is to understand how these biases can get into AI systems and how we can prevent that from happening. Because if we don't address these issues now, they're just going to get worse as AI becomes more powerful.
Which is why it's so important to have diverse voices involved in developing and deploying AI systems.
Absolutely. We need people from different backgrounds with different perspectives and experiences to make sure these systems are fair and equitable for everyone.
Okay, I think that's a good place to pause for now. We've covered a lot of ground in this second part of our deep dive, and I think it's important to give our listeners some time to process all this. We'll continue this conversation in part 3, where we'll explore some of the solutions and strategies for making sure AI is developed and used responsibly. So we've talked about all the risks of AI, right? Especially superintelligence. But it's not all doom and gloom, right? There's got to be a way to make sure AI is actually a good thing for the world.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there are tons of people working on exactly that, making sure AI is beneficial to humanity. It's not just about preventing the bad stuff. It's about actually shaping AI so it can be used to make things better.
I like that, shaping AI. So where do we even start with something like that?
Well, one really important area is something called value alignment. It's basically making sure AI systems understand human values and that they actually act in accordance with those values.
Okay, but how do you teach a machine about human values? I mean, even for us humans, values can be pretty subjective and complicated.
Yeah, it's a tough problem. But there are some interesting approaches. Like one idea is to use machine learning to train AI systems on huge data sets of human behavior, like literature, philosophical texts, things like that. The idea is to expose the AI to lots of different human values and perspectives so it can learn and internalize those values.
So it's like giving an AI a crash course in being human.
Kind of, but it's not just about feeding it information. It's also about designing AI systems that can actually think about values and make ethical judgments and explain their decisions in a way that humans can understand. Transparency is super important.
That makes sense. If we're going to trust AI to make decisions, we need to know how it's making those decisions.
Right. And that connects to another big area of research, AI safety, which is about developing techniques to make sure AI systems stay under human control, even as they get more powerful and more independent.
So basically, we're talking about safeguards, like making sure there's always a kill switch.
That's part of it, yeah.
Yeah.
But it also involves things like designing AI systems with really clear goals and limits and finding ways to monitor their behavior and being able to intervene if necessary.
It sounds incredibly complicated. It's not just about writing better code. It's about like fundamental questions about the nature of intelligence and consciousness and ethics.
It really is. And it's going to take a massive effort from lots of different fields, not just computer science,
Yeah.
but also philosophy, psychology, sociology, law.
It feels like we're just scratching the surface of what AI could become.
I think that's true. And that's why it's so important to be talking about all this, to raise awareness
Yeah.
and get people involved in the conversation.
So what's your biggest takeaway from all this? What's the one thing you really want our listeners to remember?
I think the most important thing is that the future of AI isn't set in stone. It's something we're creating right now. With every choice we make, every conversation we have, every action we take.
That's actually pretty hopeful. It means we have a say in how this all plays out.
Exactly. And it starts with being informed, being engaged, and asking those tough questions about what kind of future we want.
Well said. So for everyone listening out there, the AI revolution is happening.
Right.
It's going to impact all of us, but it's not something to be afraid of. It's this chance to build a better world. But we have to be thoughtful, ethical, and really understand both the potential and the risks. So keep learning, keep questioning, and keep talking about it. Because the future of AI is in our hands.